outstanding food fare at Brewster's, 8751 West Judge Perez Drive in Chalmette. Fun, food, friends, fellowship, family. We got it all at Brewster's, and we're here again this evening for sportsNOLAtv. And a pleasant good evening to you, Ken Trahan. Glad you've joined us for another edition of sportsNOLAtv as we break down championship games in the NFL. Of course, the Super Bowl is set for New Orleans on February 3rd. Here to break it down, per usual, our regulars from sportsNOLA.com, BAW, Brian Allee-Walsh. Brian, good evening.
Kenny, always a pleasure to be on this dais. We've got a great 2 weeks ahead of us at Mardi Gras and now the Super Bowl. It's a great time to be in New Orleans. Well,
it certainly is. And, of course, coming to New Orleans, the Baltimore Ravens, the San Francisco 49ers. Torrance Small, former New Orleans Saint wide receiver. No team that you formerly played for is coming, right?
No, unfortunately, I tried to play for all of them, didn't have the opportunity to, Ken. I really tried too. I got 5 of them in. I came up just a little short, but I was trying. But hey, starting off the new year, I'm starting off on a good note. Look, I have the same shirt as Brian Allee-Walsh. I'm setting the pace with him right now.
And our special guest here this evening, he tried Chicago, tried Dallas, tried New Orleans.
And was actually in the camp for the Baltimore Ravens.
Oh, he went to camp with the Ravens.
Here he is.
And he liked to do that stuff.
Let's see if you see 80,
he can
83
fly.
block.
Tie on the fly.
There's 83 on the block.
That's a much younger block.
He's somewhere up in there, I know that.
There's 83 on the block.
He's
so the spring.
Yes, he
That's
was.
what they call it.
Torrance was
Tyrone Hughes, did he ever block Tyrone?
Oh, definitely. I'm going to tell you, the last game of my rookie year,
Yeah.
playing against Philadelphia, we losing. And that's actually, I think, got me into the Pro Bowl. I break out on a punt return coming around the corner, and guess who lays out the punter? Torrance Small.
Yours truly.
That makes sense.
Hey, listen, hold
me
on.
loose.
I'm the
Right
punter.
Yeah.
I'm the
Seriously.
reason.
Hey, but he went, he went, tried to block the punt, then came back, and then went back and blocked the punter.
But listen to this,
What a
guys.
man.
I am the reason for the concussion thing. That's why guys have to hit low now. They can't hit high because of me.
All because of Small. You learn something new every week on sportsNOLAtv. And you're going to learn something new right after this break as we show you the highlights of the NFC and AFC championship games as sportsNOLAtv continues from Brewster's in Chalmette. A rarity for both road teams to win at this time of the year to get to the Super Bowl, but it happened, and both earned it. Ken Trahan, sportsNOLAtv from Brewster's in Chalmette, and the road to the Super Bowl is done. We know who's coming. The countdown, though, continues. 13 days to Super Bowl 47 here in New Orleans, San Francisco against Baltimore. We saw how they got here. Let's talk about how they got here now. Let's start with the NFC, same order we went with highlights. Brian, the 49ers found a way to win. Down 17-0, biggest deficit to overcome. They do it on the road. Clearly earned it. Thought they were the better team going in. Sure didn't look like it for a half. Found their footing, and then they proved themselves. And again, the theme for both games is gambles that paid off. For the 49ers, Jim Harbaugh going to Colin Kaepernick, and for the Baltimore Ravens, the firing of Cam Cameron and the promotion of Jim Caldwell to offensive coordinator paid dividends for both teams. First on the 49ers.
I agree totally, Kenny. You know, as that game developed and the Niners fell behind 17-0, I thought there's no way if Alex Smith is behind center, they're going to come back from this deficit. It's not the way he plays. But with Kaepernick, we've seen him just in his brief tenure in the National Football League. This guy's a big playmaker. He makes good decisions. He goes home run ball. They have a lot of confidence in him. So it didn't surprise me that he brought his team back, especially what we saw a week earlier, how Seattle came back from a 20-point deficit. So the best team in the NFC is coming to New Orleans.
And Torrance, one of the things about Kaepernick, aside from the obvious big arm, unbelievable speed, they're not asking him to carry the game. He's thrown the ball under 30 times in both of these playoff games. Last week against Green Bay, this week, of course, against Atlanta. So they're not asking him to win the game. They're asking him to make the right reads and manage the game.
And that's what he's doing. What's making this guy a great competitive quarterback right now, as a lot of these young quarterbacks are coming in, they're using their strength. The strength is sort of like the read option. It's helping those guys out, making the defense stink a little bit more for against them, and now they're able to throw the deeper balls and throw the intermediate balls as well. So by them being able to run that read option, that helps them out a whole lot. But let's go back and look at Atlanta. Atlanta is not all what we thought they were as well. Here they are, number 1 seed in the NFC, but they haven't played great ball come the second, third, and fourth quarter. And teams have been able to come back on it. All year they've been lucking up winning games, but this game they weren't able to come back.
And yet, Tyrone, Atlanta is an extremely talented team offensively. In the first half, they were unstoppable. 24 points. Julio Jones was an absolute beast. Ryan was tremendous. What happened in the second half where they did not score a point?
Well, one thing about it is Atlanta is notorious for if you look over the last few seasons, they've done well in the regular season. The problem is they have not been able to get it done in the playoffs. And when you see the Matt Ryans, the Julio Jones, the Gonzalez's, like you say, you have the talent on the offensive side. They haven't been able to get it done defensively in the crunch when it's counted. Regular season is fine, but in the playoffs, it's 0-0. Everybody is matched up. You have to come with 100% and ready to play every game. And defensively, they just haven't been able to get it done in the third and fourth quarter.
Who had a better package than them, Brian? Roddy White is a number 1 receiver, has been for a few years. Julio Jones has emerged as a number 1 receiver, and Tony Gonzalez is a number 1 receiver. Who had a better package than that in terms of throwing the football?
Well, it's funny, but Kaepernick outplayed Matt Ryan. I mean, here's a guy that's making his 9th start. He's taken his team to the Super Bowl with the Joe Montanas and Steve Youngs, and he outplayed Matt Ryan. And this has been the knock against Ryan in the postseason, that when it came time to make plays, and I know criticism has been of the Falcons coaching staff, especially against the Seattle game, Kenny, where they played soft in the second half against the Seahawks. Cutter, the coordinator, cut down the package. Mike Smith, I'm not a Mike Smith fan. I still am not a Mike Smith fan. I just think they pull back instead of just letting these guys play. They pull back, and I think it cost them yesterday.
Roddy White slipped on the interception in defense of Matt Ryan, and then Ryan got hurt too and tried to play through that. So it's certainly not on him. We tend to put too much on the quarterbacks, don't we?
Yes, I'm not going to put it on the quarterback, but let's go back to their defense. Their defense didn't play aggressive. They feared Kaepernick was what they did. They didn't want him to get to the outside, so they did not bring any pressure on this guy. This guy was able to sit back and throw the ball, and everybody was expecting him to run for this 100-yard, and this guy threw the ball exceptionally well.
The reality, Tyrone, their defense, Atlanta's, is not very good.
It wasn't, but if you look at the first half, they didn't run that read option as much as they did in the second half. And one of the key things coming into this game, Atlanta committed, we're not going to let Kaepernick beat us running the read option and him running the ball. So we're going to take him out the game, which opened the door for Gore. And they ran it, and they ran it well.
Baltimore wins the game in convincing fashion by the score. The score was a little bit deceiving against New England because the Patriots had the ball inside the 25 over and over again, just couldn't score, Brian. Missed opportunities, dropped balls, penalties, and then players dropping. I thought injuries certainly hurt them as well.
I agree, and it was very un-Patriot-like, if you will, un-Belichick-like. I thought they got out-coached, or Belichick didn't push all the right buttons. There were 3 times they punted inside their 40-yard line, inside the Ravens' 40-yard line. And I know there was a blustery win yesterday and everything, but you know what? That's not Patriot football. That's not what has gotten them to the pinnacle of where they are. And also Tom Brady. Tom Brady didn't play like the Tom Brady. Yeah, there were drops, okay, but they did not play well, and I think a lot of it had to do with Baltimore.
Well, this is the thing with the Patriots. One thing with the Patriots, they're great when you have an open field and this long field. They can move the defense a lot, make them react to a lot of different things. But once that field's shortened, the Patriots doesn't have a deep threat. They're no threat to get behind you. Now it's a tight window, and they had made Tom Brady throw in these tight windows, and he just could not get anybody open in these tight windows. They have nobody to stretch the field. You don't have Gonzo to get deep to stretch the safety. They had nobody to move the safeties, and everybody was tight, and that's why they couldn't move the ball when they got down there in the red zone.
And one thing about the AFC, what you have to look at over the last 10 years, I mean, you look at the teams that have played and that have gone to the Super Bowl. It's either been the Baltimore Ravens, maybe Indianapolis once or twice, with the New England Patriots and Pittsburgh. You know, those 4 teams are the key team over the last 10 years that have been going to the Super Bowl. So you know, the Ravens, I guess it was their time. You know, when you look at it, and Belichick has done, I think, obviously an excellent job with getting those guys there. I think 5 of the last, over the last 10 years, at least 5 or 6 times, they've been in the Super Bowl, won it 3 times. And I don't know what it is. I think they're starting to become like the Buffalo Bills or something, where you're getting to that point, you just can't get over the hump.
Joe Flacco has answered a lot of questions, Brian. They fired an offensive coordinator largely because of his inconsistency, and yet here he is. He beats Peyton Manning and Tom Brady back-to-back. You can make the argument that he outplayed both, and they're coming to the Super Bowl.
It's a great time for Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's going to make a lot of money in the offseason. You know, he's up for a contract, new contract, and you know, he's proven. I'm still not ready to put him in that elite status, but I'll tell you what, you get him in the postseason up against the big names, the big guys, and he holds his own. He's a great road quarterback. And what I liked is that Jim Caldwell opened it up in the second half, and they said, we're going to ride with Joe Flacco here. We're going to let him open it up.
Yeah, and that's the one thing I like about Joe Flacco. Understand? I used to call him Joe Slacko because he couldn't get it done. But now you got to the next level, but you haven't gotten there yet. Not until you win, till you hold up the trophy. Not until you come off that field as world champion. Then you can probably be mentioned with some of the elite. Right now, you just beat some of the elite. You haven't won it yet. Until you do that, you'll still be Joe Flacco.
And another thing, I mean, again, Ken, as you were saying, we give a lot of credit to the quarterbacks. I think if you look at Joe Flacco and what he's done a great job to be consistent and not lose the game for his team. But one guy you definitely got to give credit to through these postseason is Anquan Boldin, because he's pulled him out, and I think that's where that quarterback-receiver relationship comes in, where he knows no matter where I put the ball, this guy's going to go up and get it, and he made Flacco look great. I mean, it's kind of like Brett Favre's receivers when he was playing. You know, I told everybody, my daughter could go out and throw the passes Brett threw, but a lot of them times those receivers bailed him out and made him look great.
Yeah, I equate Joe Flacco to Eli Manning. Eli Manning had inconsistency all over his career for the first few years of his career. Then all of a sudden he breaks through in that one playoff run. They go to the Super Bowl. Tyree makes the catch. They win. All of a sudden he takes a big step into the upper echelon, and he's still there. Flacco may be following suit. We'll take a time out here. When we return in just a moment, we'll talk New Orleans Saints as Sports NOLA TV continues from Brewster's in Chalmette. Our Sports NOLA trivia question of the evening. Quarterbacks have been named MVP of the last 3 Super Bowls. Who was the last running back to be named Super Bowl MVP? Your 4 choices: The Bus, New Orleanian Marshall Faulk, Emmitt Smith, a.k.a. Dancing with the Stars, and Terrell Davis of the Denver Broncos. Think about it, ponder it, and we'll have an answer for you later in the show. Let's see how smart you are and see if you know the correct answer. Ken Trahan, Sports NOLA TV at Brewster's, West Judge Perez Drive in Chalmette, where the food is outstanding. The New Orleans Saints were less than outstanding in the 2012 season. They hope to recapture the magic with Sean Payton's imminent return sometime soon, although we're not totally sure when that will be. Let's take a look at headlines regarding the New Orleans Saints. Aaron Kromer departing the Saints to become offensive coordinator of the Chicago Bears under their new head coach, Mark Trestman. Jonathan Vilma had his defamation lawsuit dismissed last week, and the Saints staff, minus Sean Payton, heads to the Senior Bowl this week. So, Brian, start with the last one in the Senior Bowl. Not having the coach there certainly doesn't help. That's a situation where you have to hire a coach. It's a situation where you evaluate. It's a situation where you talk with other people, and your head coach cannot do it. Sean Payton basically knows that he can't be there, even though it's not an NFL activity. He doesn't want to rock the boat, and I think that's probably the right decision for him.
Yeah, and it certainly does hurt because, one of his strengths, not only as a play caller, he's considered one of the best in the NFL, but his ability to evaluate personnel, and particularly for his defense or his offense, excuse me. He knows the kind of players that he wants. Also on defense, there's so much input. So, it's a loss not to have him over there evaluating, but the beauty of tape and film and everything, he'll be able to get up to snuff eventually when he gets reinstated.
Yeah, but it's nothing like sitting down in front of somebody and talking to them and getting to the emotion part of it sometimes. We sit and we text with technology. I tell my kids all the time, we sit and text and email all the time till you don't know the real person till you sit down and talk to them. And I think he needs to sit down across the table for someone if we're going to be bringing them in, if we're trying to win the championships now.
But not only that, I mean, when you look at it, and I don't think it's going to be so much of a problem or too big of a problem, him not being there, because a lot of this still goes through the scouting department. Those guys know what type of players they're looking for, what they're in the need for. So without him being there, they'll still make the suggestions on this guy needs to come in or that guy needs to come in to Mickey Loomis. And once Sean is able to come back, he can still sit down and talk with him.
And there have been suggestions, Brian. The biggest problem is he needs to fill a prominent place on his coaching staff, and he cannot do it because he's not back yet. Speculation surrounds Tony Sperano, who's coached that position and has skins on the wall. You got to believe he has somebody ready to go when he gets back on the job.
Yeah, a guy I thought of, Kenny, immediately was Mike Tice up in Chicago. Mike Tice has been a head coach, offensive line, running game guy. He's the kind of guy that I think would fit in nicely. That said, going back to just for a moment on Sean Payton, they will have the combine for him if he is reinstated after the Super Bowl, as the commissioner has said. Now, that's the date I think that's up in the air right now, Kenny. Is it, I've heard that it could be, if Goodell wants to, he could extend this thing to the end of the football calendar year.
But that would be totally absurd.
I agree.
And patently
Totally.
unfair.
I agree.
Hasn't he punished this franchise enough already? Are you kidding me? I mean, that would be ridiculous. It's already been ridiculous. Agreed?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
I agree.
overkill.
If it's the fourth, as we hope, as everyone is kind of anticipated, if it's the fourth, then that would give him enough time to go up to Indianapolis and sit in front of these guys and do what he does best.
Exactly.
I think so. I mean, like I said, you got the if he's allowed to come back after the Super Bowl, get to the combine. Again, it's really not so much the head coach is conducting those interviews, though. He leaves a lot of that up to the scouting department. But Sean is hands-on with that scenario of wanting to know, okay, I want this guy, I want that guy. But a lot of it has to do with the scouting department bringing him the information on these players.
As for the dismissal of the Vilma suit, Torrance, clearly you cannot be surprised by it. And in a way, I think it's good and I like it because can we finally move on from all of this?
Hopefully we can put all this behind. Hopefully on the 4th, once the 4th get here, it'll really be behind. Sean Payton will be back. He'll be able to conduct business as usual. All the players will be able to conduct business as usual, and we can put this behind and move forward with 2013 and start off with a good note.
And a lot of speculation about other coaches that may or may not be back. One name that was mentioned prominently, linked to other jobs, was Pete Carmichael, and he apparently is going to stay. He's telling people at the Senior Bowl that is in fact the case, that he'll have a new deal with the Saints, Brian, and obviously that's a good thing. He's tied very closely to Sean Payton.
Yeah, I agree. I think it keeps some continuity for sure, and I'm glad that he is coming back. He had his interview up in Chicago, and there have been so many openings, so many opportunities for a guy like Pete Carmichael with the way that the league was looking at offensive-minded people. I thought Pete had a real good shot, but you know what? There's plenty of time for him to perhaps down the road be considered for head coaching material again.
Tyrone, we've talked about this on previous shows, but as you look at the New Orleans Saints as they're constituted right now, what is, in your mind, their biggest need to address?
Oh, definitely it's going to be, to me, it's going to be the defensive line. Some offensive line also, they got issues there also, but definitely the defensive line. Because, again, the Saints have, not just this year, not last year, historically, they have not been able to stop the run, regardless of whose system they've been in, whether it's Greg Williams or guy now, Spagnuolo. Their issue has been they have not been able to stop the run with the front seven.
They've done a good job plugging in Torrance, but the reality is Jonathan Goodwin's coming back to New Orleans playing in a Super Bowl. He's pretty good. Carl Nix was awfully good when he was here. And although they've replaced those guys with solid guys, Tyrone mentioned offensive line. Certainly the guys they've replaced him with aren't quite as good physically as the guys they replaced.
Well, one thing about those guys that were lost, those guys were a dual threat. They can pass block as well as a run block. Ben Grills was known as a run blocker, not so much as a pass blocker. But he's done great for us. But when you have a Drew Brees, some of that stuff can offset because here's a guy smart enough to get rid of the ball a lot sooner. But I definitely need, again, with you, is the defensive line. Not only just to stop the run, but we need somebody to rush the passers. We're not strong at all back in the defensive back area. We definitely need some pass rush.
Well, they need help across the board defensively, Brian. We've talked about this frequently. They do need a pass rusher. They need to be more consistent inside on defense with their tackles. They need to have outside linebackers that can run and make plays, and they certainly need a safety, at least one that is a playmaker, because they don't have one right now.
I agree. I don't think there's an area of the defense that you can't try to upgrade during the offseason. And I think Jabari Greer, of all, if I had to name untouchable players on defense, Jabari would be one of them, Kenny. But I still think they're in need of a real shutdown corner, a guy that you can say, go guard him, and we're going to turn everybody else over here. And they really don't have that.
It's hard to find them, though.
No, it is. It's hard. But look what one means to a defense if you can do that.
But not only that, somebody with some size. We're very small back there. We need somebody with some size because what if you ran into a Bolden, Antoine Bolden, a guy like that? Who's going to stop that guy?
Yeah, I mean, Harper and Jenkins are plenty big enough at safety, but you're right about the cornerback position. It is not as big, certainly bigger than when you had Tracy Porter, who, by the way, couldn't stay healthy this year in Denver either. So no great loss there, even though he'll always be remembered fondly in Saints annals for what he accomplished when he was in New Orleans, in particular in that Super Bowl season and in the Super Bowl game itself. We'll take a time out here. When we return in just a moment, is the NFL fair in hiring minority coaches? Stay tuned on Sports NOLA TV. Our Sports NOLA TV trivia question of the evening, all about quarterbacks. They've been named MVP of the last 3 Super Bowls. Who was the last running back to be named Super Bowl MVP? Was it the bust Jerome Bettis, New Orleanian Marshall Faulk of Carver High School, Emmitt Smith, or Terrell Davis? And the correct answer is Terrell Davis, you bet. He was the man. What an incredible career he was on the way to before a serious knee injury curtailed that with the Broncos. So quarterbacks, they get the ink and they get the trophies too, and they go to Disney World, right? Ken Trahan, Sports NOLA TV, Brewster's, West Judge Perez Drive in Chalmette. Time now for our hot seat segment where we place Brian Allee-Walsh on the hot seat with a hot topic which we will debate. This is Martin Luther King Day, a very important day in American history for a very important man whom is greatly admired by every American and should be based upon the content of his character, which he made sure to point out about others and how we look at everyone in this society today. Martin Luther King would be very happy that African Americans and minorities, and I stress minorities, not just African Americans, would get opportunities to be head coaches in professional sports. Many have across the board. But that number has been greatly reduced in the NFL with the recent batch of hirings. Our topic today is the NFL fair in promoting the hiring of head football coaches who are minorities. Brian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kenny. Yeah, it's a very hot topic right now with so many NFL coaching openings. There were 8. They're filled, and they're all Caucasian coaches. Right now, there are 4 minority coaches in the NFL out of 32. You all can do the math on that. I think the Rooney Rule, and they've talked about it, those that are in power to change, to tweak, to update, to modernize, whatever you want to call it, Kenny, they're going to do that in this offseason. Not only that, are they going to do with the coaches, the head coaches, but also the coordinators as well. There's teams have circumvented the rule for years, and that is you fulfill your obligations to the Rooney Rule by bringing in a minority coach to interview. That said, you see a lot of teams doing that just out of as a courtesy interview and not truly it's not a to me it's a violation of the spirit of the rule, is that you're just bringing it to honor the rule instead of really bringing in a person who you feel is a qualified candidate. And I think that's where this whole thing needs to kind of begin and end with, is that, in closing, Kenny, I think that certainly this rule needs to be modernized, needs to be updated, and I think you need to close some loopholes and also expand it to where it does include the coordinators for NFL teams.
Yeah, it's too broad. It's not doing. It's like a token.
It's a good first step.
It's something just saying, we brought a guy in, and it's not fair. It's not fair at all. One thing I know, when I played ball, I know some guys that used to work in the front office, some guys that were like errand boys. Now, some of them are coordinators and head coaches now. I've seen some of the same black coaches sitting there for years and years doing the same old thing and have not gotten a chance, have not gotten the opportunity. And here you bring a guy out of a mail room, comes in, is a position coach to an offensive coordinator to a head coach, and he's able to go and interview for a job, and we can't get a black coach to go and get just an opportunity, a look, a serious look, not just a token look, just an opportunity. I think it's a start, but it definitely has to be changed, and I think it needs to be changed drastically. I think it needs to be changed now. 8 coaches, 5 different coordinators, general managers, and you have nobody in a minority. Because let's look at it. We again, you said it's not just blacks, it's minorities.
Correct.
But the last coach other than a black coach, we had Tom Flores. Probably was one back with the Raiders.
Would be considered a minority, correct.
A minority, if I'm not mistaken, who won the Super Bowl. I think a lot of them need opportunity. As you can see, a lot of coaches, some coaches getting fired after 1 year. And I just think, we need to take a serious look at some of these guys, because I see too many guys that have been coaching 20 and 30 years in the league as position coaches and never got a look. I'm talking about black coaches.
I want to get Tyrone to comment, but I want to ask you this. Do you feel like there's discrimination?
Would I say discrimination? I think it's nepotism in it, because it's all about who you know. Mm-hmm. If I'm a coach, and most of the coaches I've been working with been white, I'm going to hire my buddy who I know. I want somebody who I'm comfortable with. Now, I know some of the white coaches have been taking some of the black coaches who've been working with. Tony Dungy I think, got in like that, got an opportunity because he worked with a white coach. But I want to say it's I'm not going to say it's racism or anything, or discrimination, but I do think it's some like nepotism in there where they're bringing a friend along, and we just need to have some of those black
Tyrone, I'll let you comment first. Yes or no, discrimination in your mind?
I don't think it's discrimination. I can't put that word on it because we are getting the opportunity. I just think it's a BS rule. And the reason why I say it's a BS rule, because I don't even think it needs to be there. Reason being, teams know who they want to pick as a head coach. When Dallas Cowboys wanted to bring Bill Parcells in, they had to wait to hire him until they brought in Art Shell to give him an interview. So was that fair to Art Shell? When the Cincinnati Bengals they knew they wanted Marvin Lewis. So if you know who you want, it shouldn't be a situation, okay, well, let's find a minority coach or whomever to give him an opportunity, or just to say we're giving you an opportunity. If you really want to make changes in the NFL, if you really want to give minorities an opportunity to get to these head coaching jobs, especially in the college level, but if you want to give minorities an opportunity to get some of these jobs, make it a mandatory deal that you have to have played on the level that you're coaching. That will change things.
You bring up a good point, Ty, and all of these hirings that have been done in the last month since the end of the season, we're not even talking about John Gruden, Bill Cowher, guys that are respectable, successful head coaches. Mm-hmm. They're not even in the mix. Exactly. We're talking about, you call it nepotism, I call it the good old boy network.
It is. Because when you look at it, you got to have, most coaches get their jobs from starting off on the college level, from being grad assistants. In the NFL, they call it quality control. Mm-hmm. As a quality control coach, you basically break down film for the coaches. Exactly. And then after 2 years, you're able to get a coaching job. But you've never played the game.
Well, listen, I don't disagree. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and render a judgment right now for this entire segment. I don't believe there's discrimination. I think it's simply a matter of who you're comfortable with, who you surround yourself with, who you know, who you've been around, who you feel safe with, who you know that isn't going to usurp your authority, who you know isn't going to turn his back on you, and therefore they hire the people they know. I understand that. That's the nature of business. They have a right to do what they want to do. That said, clearly the rule isn't working. And when you get to the concept of tokenism and patronization, it's really kind of a waste, isn't it? I mean, you're putting a guy up who you know has no chance to get that job. But because of the rule, I'm going to bring him in and showboat him to the world. I brought this guy in to talk to him when everybody knows he's not going to get the job. It would be a lot different if you brought in a very qualified candidate and a guy that was a real comer that had a chance to succeed. We had a batch of college coaches that were considered for NFL jobs just recently. None of those guys were African Americans. There's a coach at Stanford right now who's done a remarkable job. Jim Harbaugh deserved every opportunity he got. And Lord knows he's done a great job with the 49ers, taking over for an African American coach in Mike Singletary, who was a disaster and couldn't coach last year to eat dog food. That said, Harbaugh proved himself. And then there's a guy now at Stanford that's done just as good a job, if not better, than he's done sustaining it without luck. And did he get a mention at all? No way. So there's something wrong with what's going on right now. With regard to some of the coaches, and the list is there. Tony Dungy, he got a second chance. He deserved it. Great coach. Art Shell, enough said. Mike Singletary, enough said. Jim Caldwell is coaching himself back into another opportunity as a coordinator for a team that's in a Super Bowl. Raheem Morris, he's young, might get another chance. Lovie Smith deserves another chance. Romeo Crennel, been there, done that. Judge for yourself, but I think it's all about tokenism, patronization, and a situation where people stay with who they're comfortable with rather than discrimination. We'll take a time out here. We'll talk about the Hornets and more when we continue in just a moment on Sports NOLA TV from Brewster's in Chalmette. Trending now at sportsNOLA.com, the latest on LSU and Tulane recruiting, Hornets and college basketball news, the most complete prep coverage across the board, and our first NBC video updates and more at sportsNOLA.com, best site on the web. Go there, stay there, click many times, and enjoy all the great content at sportsNOLA.com. Ken Trahan from Brewster's in Chalmette and the New Orleans Hornets playing good basketball most recently and scoring points in the process. It's been fun to watch this team mature as we look at what they've been able to do most recently and look at some of the scores that the Hornets have gone through. One at Philadelphia very impressively, one at Boston as well, and then lost at home to Golden State. But what gets my attention, Brian, is even in the loss, they scored 112 points. As I wrote at sportsNOLA.com, this has become a far more entertaining team because they're able to score the basketball more. And that's all because of the presence of Eric Gordon. He's kind of changed the dynamic, hasn't he?
I totally agree, and really make a case they should have beaten Golden State. They let that game slip away, which was reminiscent of the way they were losing games last year. But they've had trouble scoring in the third quarter in the past. They're dominating third quarters right now, and you're right. Eric Gordon makes them a team that can compete every night out.
We saw Anthony Davis. He continues to improve. He's worth the investments, Torrance. Ryan Anderson's been really good. And Gravis Vasquez may be the most improved player in the league.
Oh, I talked about Vasquez early this morning. I was talking to a friend. I think he's great for us. Whenever Gordon is out, he comes in and he handles that offense for us. And that's why we're able to score some points, because we have a great balance. Gordon gives us a great balance with guys coming off the bench, and we don't miss a beat with scoring points.
Tyrone, obviously, this is a team that's young, second youngest team in the league. If you can keep this core group together, it's going to be fun to watch them mature, but the key is, can you keep them together?
Just can you keep them together? Can you have this? Do you have the salary cap room to afford to keep all of these guys? And I think, again, going back to what Torrance said, Eric Gordon's back on the floor. They've improved their season. I think Monty Williams is doing an excellent job of keeping those guys out there and putting them in plays and situations that's going to benefit to where everything's surrounding Eric Gordon and until Anthony Davis grows up. Oh, he hasn't, and just know he's the way he's playing now. He hasn't grown up yet.
Well, the salient point here is entertainment, winning, entertainment. The two will go hand in hand at some point. They are to a degree now. When the two meet, it's going to be fun to watch. And right now, it's fun to watch because it's a different type of team. Ever since Chris Paul and David West departed under Monty Williams, this has been a very plodding, slow, half-court team that cannot score and just not fun to watch. And as a spectator, if you're not winning and you're not entertaining, you're not coming back to the game and paying that price. Now this is a team that can score, that's got some juice, that's young, that can get up and down the floor, and has some young players that are going to get better. Therefore, it's worth paying the price and going to see them play. I highly recommend it, and I think you're going to see a team that's going to continue to get better, knock on wood, if they can stay healthy. Another hot topic of debate as we look at the upcoming Hornets games. Spurs, always a tough get. That's the model for the Hornets. Houston, and that's a good team that's playing 500 ball right now. Memphis, one of the better teams right now, not just in the West, but in the NBA, a threat to win it all. So that's a tough 3-game stretch for the Hornets, no doubt. The other hot topic of discussion surrounds high school athletics and a big vote coming up Friday on the potential to split the LHSAA into select and non-select schools. Bottom line, select schools would be private schools, Christian Catholic schools, as well as charter and magnet schools, which we have nothing but of in New Orleans, basically, among public schools. And, of course, the traditional public schools, which are not charter or magnet schools. I'm patently against this legislation and think you ought to find a way to work together and stay together. I thought segregation ended about 40 years ago. Brian, your thoughts?
Kenny, I agree. We've talked about this on the show ad nauseum, and you know, if you take a look at what happened this year in the Superdome, of those champions, you'd have teams that would not be competing against each other because of this rule. I'm fearful that it has a chance of passing. I'm hopeful that it won't. And you know why? Because I think in down the road, Kenny, you might have these charter school or these select schools perhaps branching off and forming their own association. Yep.
And Torrance, maybe the last straw was that all 5 teams that won state championships would be considered non-select schools, including Edna Carr.
Well, and that's the thing. You know, if you want to call yourself a true champion, you play all. It's been like that's been tradition. Do not change tradition. I hope they don't vote and agree to this split. Like you say, I'm against it totally.
Tyrone, you coached at Phoenix, and of course you played at St. Augustine, coached at Jesuit. So you've been on both sides of the ledger. Don't you think this association ought to find a way to keep these people together?
Definitely, especially here in Louisiana because it's so small. I mean, and I was just telling Brian, in Texas, they do have this split where you have the Catholic League one side and then you have the public schools on the other side. Now, the only school in Texas that plays in the public school system, which is a Catholic school, is Jesuit Prep. Or the 2 Jesuit schools, one in Houston, one in Dallas. And they're the only ones. But the whole thing here is still schools, the public schools are always and always have been complaining about recruiting. You know, whether it's to a charter school or the guys going to the Catholic schools or what have you, that the Catholic schools have the advantage of getting the better kids. But yet you have public schools out there. If you get better coaches and do a better job with better talent, with the talent you have, you win some state championships.
I got a solution to this whole thing, and we only got about 30 seconds. Open enrollment. Look, Edna Carr is a magnet school. They get kids from everywhere, okay? And people say, well, that's an unfair advantage. Well, guess what? Parents want to send their children there. Why? Because their ACT scores are good, and they graduate kids and they go on and do well. As a public school, raise your level, make yourself more viable to make yourself more attractive to young men and women.
Winning will draw talent on any level. Everybody wants to go to Alabama. Why? Because they're going to win a national championship. Guys, you're going to see more guys and more kids want to go to Rummel now. Why? Because they won the state championship. Everybody wants to go to Curtis. Everybody wants to go to Curtis.
But parents want their young men and women educated too, so they also send them to Ben Franklin.
Well, exactly. Yeah. Not only that, but they go to Alabama because they get more money there too.
Bang! Shot across the bow. We'll be back to take a look at what's coming up when we continue with Sports NOLA TV. Brewster's 8751 West Judge Perez Drive here in Chalmette. The phone number on screen. Great place anytime for food, but especially for a Super Bowl party on Super Bowl Sunday. Free boiled crabs. I said free boiled crabs. This is the place to be. And a lot of specials that day across the board. Here at Brewster's, you need to be here to sample it and enjoy it. If it's free, it's for me, right? Be here at Brewster's. You'll enjoy it. Everything's good at Brewster's. Super Bowl 47 matchup is set. 49ers and the Ravens in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome on February 3rd. 49ers, well, they've never lost one of these things, and they're the early favorite this time around. Ravens, well, just over a decade ago, they won one. Brian, your early favorite and why?
I'll tell you what, I predict two things. One, that Tyrone will, my friend over here will be here for Brewster's and the free food. And then two, a team with a coach named Harbaugh is going to walk away with the title. Go to the bank on that one.
Hey,
I
you
tried.
might not be wrong on either one of those picks. But my pick, I'm going to pick the 49ers. Colin Kaepernick, hey, the guy proved that he can run. Last week he proved that he can throw. I think with that balance, I'm picking the 49ers.
Tyrone?
I'm going with the Baltimore Ravens only because I think it's going to be a great defensive game. Both teams are going to step up, and I don't think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I would say Baltimore Ravens 25-21.
Seriously, Brian, who do you like?
I guess if I had to push right now, I like the Niners. I like the Niners. And I like them because of Kaepernick.
Yes.
Yeah, I like them too. I think their defense overall is a little bit better. I think their offensive line is better. And I think Kaepernick is an X factor. If he doesn't spit the bit and panic in this game, he hasn't so far. You never know on this stage, but if he doesn't, I think they'll win the game. If he does, then the Ravens clearly can win the game. The Ravens are underestimated, and they're a good football team, but I think San Francisco is the best team, and I'm not too sure that Seattle isn't the second best team in the NFL, and a close second at that, but they didn't get there, so forget about it. Tyrone Hughes, pleasure having you with you, my friend. Always great to have you.
All right, guys.
And Torrance, always good to see you, my
good to
friend.
see you.
Brian, keep up the great work,
Thank you, buddy.
sportsNOLA.com and beyond. And of course, we want to thank our entire crew, Lenny and Adam and Andrew and everyone for being with us, and you as well on Sports NOLA TV. God bless you one and all. Rounding third and heading home. So long.